Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today for another episode of Learning with Human Kinetics. I'm Aaron Patterson, a NSCA certified personal trainer and sports performance coach. And today we're going to talk about a topic that will hopefully answer some questions for people who aren't sure what to do when it comes to their training sessions. I'll start this entire discussion by saying that I truly believe everyone can benefit from working with a certified personal trainer, and that includes coaches themselves. Regardless of how the relationship is arranged, it is important to get the perspective of someone who is able to identify weaknesses that need to be improved and hold us accountable. Otherwise, we'll only work on things that we are good at and that we enjoy. That's why people skip leg day. So whether you are working out solo, with a friend, or with a trainer, there are certain aspects of a complete training program that should be addressed. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Now, the details will depend on your specific goals, but the bigger picture, you should always include things like warm-up, along with stability, mobility, and flexibility. Power development. Now, some people might think power development is only important for competitive athletes, but the truth is everyone needs to be able to exert a certain level of power to do normal daily activities. Strength. Everybody needs strength, and everyone needs it for different reasons. The specific reason will depend on your goals and lifestyle. Now, along with strength training, we can talk about hypertrophy. Again, the amount of hypertrophy work included in your program might depend on your situation. And finally, conditioning. Conditioning is key for athletes, but the cardiovascular impact is huge for everyone. Now, the warm-up is intended to get the body ready for whatever movements you'll be performing in that particular session. The primary benefits of a warm-up are to increase blood flow to the muscles, increase the sensitivity of the nerve receptors, increase the dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin and myoglobin, increase the speed of nerve impulse transmissions, reduce muscle viscosity, and lower the energy rates of metabolic chemical reactions. Now, everyone is different, and many of my clients will go through a different warm-up based on their specific need and any issues they might be working through. In general, and specifically for athletes, I prefer a dynamic warm-up, which takes care of all the components that I just mentioned, but it also works through flexibility and mobility issues that might need prepped before getting into the later stages of your workout. A total dynamic warm-up might include things like walking lunges in all directions, so we'll go forward, backward, and lateral. Something like inchworms and straight leg walks for hips and hamstrings. We'll get the heart rate up and blood flowing a little more with things like butt kickers, high knee run and back pedal. We'll get into hops like pogos and broad jumps, skips, forward, backward, lateral, and karaoke. All of these get the body moving in nearly all directions and work different movements. If you're unable to do hops or skips, a short 2 to 5 minute walk or similar time on a bike will also help increase the internal body temperature to get you ready. Regardless of where you are in your development or how much time you have, it's so important to spend a few minutes warming up prior to getting into your workout. It'll prepare you for the next part of your workout, and your body will thank you later. Mike Boyle famously said that the percentage of your workout dedicated to mobility should correlate to your age. For example, if you are 20 years old, you should devote 20% of your workout to mobility and stretching. If you're 60 years old, you should spend about 60% of your workout doing mobility exercises. Now, the joke then is, well, what do I do when I'm 101 years old? Well, in that case, I would say count your blessings and be thankful for the good health that got you there, and keep doing what you're doing. Now, while that might be fairly accurate to the condition of most individuals of those ages, each person is different, and each training session should be treated accordingly. Now, when we move into the power phase of the workout, this will also look different depending on your specific goals. An athlete, for example, might be working on power-based movements specific to the sport that they're preparing for. Someone who is not competitively active might do similar exercises, but the intent is much more general. Power is defined as the rate of performing work and is a product of force and displacement. Another way to think about it is the amount of force produced during a certain movement at a given velocity. For example, when an athlete does a bound or pushes off to run, the level of power and speed they're able to produce is relative to the amount of force they're able to put into the ground as they push off. Now, I mentioned earlier that some people think that power development is something only athletes need to be concerned with, but consider things like pushing a door open or closed, or doing yard work or general housework. Think about things that you do on a daily basis and everything that goes into a specific action. You might be surprised how much you rely on basic power movements on a daily basis to do things you take for granted. Power-based exercises can be anything that help the body become more powerful and explosive. So some examples might be medicine ball slams and chest passes, plyo push-ups, box jumps or hurdle hops, box depth drops, skips, squat jumps, band assisted jumps. This could be where you also incorporate more loaded exercises like a dumbbell or barbell snatch, clean variations, or kettlebell swings. There are other ways to incorporate power into your workouts, including adding bands or a power component to a traditional strength training exercise. For example, a squat or a bench press could be made more powerful by adding resistance bands to the bar to create a more dynamic concentric portion of the lift. Now keep in mind that when we're doing power-based exercises, the number of repetitions will generally stay low, and we'll talk more about reps and sets later on. Depending on your level of strength, it's important to first establish a solid strength base before attempting more advanced power or plyometric exercises. Now, strength training or general resistance training is what most people think of when it comes to working out. Now, this includes your primary and accessory exercises. This could mean anything from body weight movements to load-bearing movements with external weight or resistance. When thinking of your primary lifts, think of your basic movement patterns. Here's where we'll get into the basics of designing a complete workout plan when it comes to strength or resistance training. Now, in strength training, there are 5 basic movement patterns that should always be included. A lot of you might have heard of these already. They are a squat, a hinge, a lunge, upper body pushing movements, and upper body pulling movements. Now, pushing and pulling movements can be defined for both upper and lower body, but for the purposes of this discussion, and to keep it simplified, I will only refer to pushing and pulling movements as upper body movements. We can actually add in a 6th component of movement, and that is rotation or anti-rotation, as you'll find out a little bit later. I won't go into proper technique today. For that, I would refer you to my Technique Tuesday video series, and maybe there will be an opportunity later on for more in-depth discussion. But what I will do is go through specific examples of the six movement patterns that I mentioned. Now, the squat pattern is just as it sounds, starting from a tall, upright position and bending at the knees to lower yourself toward the floor as if you were going to sit down. Exercises to include in the squat movement would be exactly that, a squat. You can modify it for a more unilateral effect by squatting on one leg, or do a split squat, which to some people looks a little more like a lunge position. Now, the hinge movement is a more hip dominant movement. This is a movement that you would do when performing a deadlift. The primary movement is targeted at the hips. Think of this movement as a movement that you would do when bending over to pick something up without bending your knees excessively to go down toward the floor. You're going to fold forward at the hips, allowing you to get your torso a little closer to the floor. Common exercises that you might do in a hinge would be a traditional deadlift, a single leg deadlift, kettlebell swings, or modified Nordic hip hinge. The lunge, most people have done a lunge at some point in their life. This is simply stepping out in front of your body, bending the knee of your lead leg, and lowering your back knee down toward the floor. You can also lunge to the side or backward, or in the transverse plane, which would work into more of a rotational movement. Now, pushing movements could be, like I said, for either upper body or lower body, but like I said, for the purposes of this discussion, we'll keep it simplified, and we'll talk about upper body pushing movements. This would be something as simple as like a basic push-up or a bench press, a landmine press, cable or band push, and all of these would work the chest and shoulders. Now, pulling movements for the upper body traditionally work the back and posterior deltoids. So examples of these movements might be a dumbbell row, a TRX row, a pull-up or chin-up, or a cable or band row. Now, your specific goals for resistance training will dictate what each workout looks like, but all the basic movement patterns we just went over should be included in order to hit all the major muscle groups. Now, what each workout looks like could depend on your schedule or preference. Now, for most people, training at least 2 or 3 days per week is recommended. In this case, full body workouts are going to be the best way to go, working through each of the movement patterns I spoke of at the beginning. Each workout should then consist of a squat, a lunge, a hinge movement exercise, and an upper body pushing exercise along with an upper body pulling exercise. Now, what does this look like? The exercises of a sample workout might look like this. You could do squats for your squat pattern. You could do a dumbbell bench press or push-ups. You could do a deadlift variation. I would do forward or lateral lunges. You could do a dumbbell row or pull-ups. And to complete the strength portion of the workout, you'd want to also add in some type of core exercise for simplicity. I would say maybe a plank, and this would actually work that anti-rotation. So yeah, this workout hits all of the major muscle groups and includes all of the movement patterns. Now, if you're able to train 4 or more days per week, that is when you might change your format to more of a split routine. A split routine could mean, for example, all upper body one day, all lower body the next day, or a combo split such as like an upper body push combined with a lower body movements like squats or lunges. The next day would then be an upper body pulling exercises with a deadlift or hinge movement. An example of exercises for upper or lower body split might look like this. For example, day 1, you might do a barbell or dumbbell bench press, incline bench press, cable or dumbbell fly, dumbbell row, pull-ups, and face pulls. Day 2 would look a little more like a barbell or a dumbbell squat, deadlift or forward lunges, and reverse lunges. Now, days 3 and 4 in this case would look similarly, but should also include core work and conditioning or cardio like running or sprinting or battle ropes, rowing, biking, something like that. Now, a benefit of the 4+ day split would be more volume per muscle group and the freedom to work in more accessory exercises. Regardless of which routine you choose, it's recommended to train each major muscle group or movement at least twice per week for consistency and just for best results. That's where a full body workout would be beneficial for people with a busy schedule who might only get in 2 sessions per week. Now, the most important thing to take into consideration is making sure that you're fully recovered before going into your next training session of the similar muscle groups. So, what about goals? There are 4 primary goals of resistance training. Those would be muscular endurance, hypertrophy, muscular strength, and muscular power. So muscular endurance is commonly viewed as part of aerobic exercise because the muscles may contract thousands of times during, say, a 20-minute activity like running. So this is typically used by individuals who might be training for a certain athletic event. Hypertrophy, a lot of people are familiar with hypertrophy. That refers to an increase in muscle size. Hypertrophy training typically leads to an increase in fat-free mass and a reduction in percentage of body fat. So this is similar to training for strength, but has a primary intent of increasing muscle size. Muscular strength is perhaps the most common goal, I would say. Most people want to get stronger, whether you're a 15-year-old high school student or a 70-year-old individual who just wants to stay fit, active, and independent. In comparison with resistance training programs that target muscular endurance or hypertrophy, a strength training program uses heavier loads. So it's important to make sure that form is correct and the exercises are done in a safe way prior to increasing heavier loads. For muscular power, this is key for athletes who want to get faster and more explosive, but it's also important and beneficial for older adults and non-athletic populations. Research indicates that older adults who engage in power type training experience improvements in their ability to perform normal activities of daily living. As far as reps and sets, there's been a debate more recently, I would say, on exactly how many reps or sets and reps are appropriate for each style of training. But for general guidelines and to simplify the discussion, I'll discuss the general recommendations given by the NSCA. So for muscular endurance, the reps will generally stay high at around 10 to 15 reps with a recommended 1 to 3 sets depending on the training age and skill level. Hypertrophy is generally recommended to complete 8 to 12 repetitions for 3 or more sets. Muscular strength is building for pure strength while lifting relatively heavy loads, like I mentioned. So this means the individual can perform 1 to 6 reps for anywhere from 1 to 3 or more sets. So again, this depends on the experience of the lifter. For muscular power, it's recommended for only experienced lifters after a solid strength base is built, but these exercises are performed for up to 6 repetitions for a maximum of 3 to 6 sets. Now, the reps remain relatively low in power-based movements because the load is higher. To simplify the idea of power training, the goal is really to move heavy loads really fast. So it's great about the reps and sets, but we want to also focus on the rest intervals for each of those individual goals. So keeping with the specific goals, for muscular endurance, you should rest for 30 seconds or less between every set. For hypertrophy, rest breaks should be limited to 90 seconds up to 3 minutes between sets. And strength and power will be relatively the same with the recommended rest interval of 2 to 5 minutes between sets. Now the final component to complete the training program is aerobic training. Now, this can be called aerobic training, cardio, conditioning. There are a lot of different names for this phase of training, but the concept is the same. They all refer to exercise that benefits the cardiovascular and respiratory systems, including the heart, blood vessels, and lungs. For athletes, this is crucial to ensure that the athletes prepare for competition. For the general population, it's important to assist in fat loss and to increase cardiorespiratory function. There are many modes of exercise that you could use in aerobic training, like running, walking, cycling, swimming, dance could be one, sports like basketball or tennis that'll keep the heart rate up, or circuit training. This type of training can be performed as a steady state cardio or interval training. Now, obviously, if you are participating in a sport, then that would be closer to interval training, unless I guess that's long distance running. Now, most people have a specific phase or type of training that they enjoy and tend to stick to that type indefinitely. For example, someone who enjoys distance running might make that their primary form of training and neglect other types of resistance training, even though utilizing resistance training the correct way would most likely help them improve their running performance. Likewise, someone who loves strength training, whether that's for strength, power, or hypertrophy, might only do that type of training and neglect any type of aerobic training. So it's important to spend a little bit of time in each training phase for overall health and fitness benefits. Now, for this reason, periodizing your training is a great way to design your training program and hit each part of the fitness cycle. For example, if you were to periodize your training program into phases, you could spend an average of 3 to 4 weeks in each phase. A sample program might begin with muscular endurance phase for 3 weeks, followed by a hypertrophy phase that lasts 4 weeks. As your training progresses, that hypertrophy phase can be transitioned into a muscular strength phase for 4 weeks, and then transition to a 3 to 4 week power phase. Now, depending on your specific goals, you would then spend 2 to 3 weeks in either a competition phase or a straight aerobic conditioning phase. Of course, most people spend a longer period of time in their desired or favorite phase, and that's perfectly fine. But the whole intent is making sure that your training plan is complete and focusing on overall health and fitness for longevity. There is another way that you could lay out your training program, and that is an undulating periodization. And this method allows for more variety during the week and combines the training styles or phases. For example, instead of spending 3 to 4 weeks on hypertrophy or strength, you could split up your 3 training days during the week into a heavy day or a strength day, a light day or a hypertrophy or endurance day, depending on your goals, and a power day. This might be more sustainable long term for most people, especially if you tend to get bored with your workouts. While you might be working the same or similar movements every training day, you're able to get more variety in the number of reps and sets you're doing from day to day. So to summarize, every training session should include, again, a warm-up, some sort of power development, strength training, whether that's for strength, endurance, or hypertrophy, and a conditioning or cardio phase. Beyond those primary components, again, make sure to include the 5 movement patterns of a squat, hinge, lunge, upper body push, and upper body pull. Set goals for the number of training sessions you'll be able to do each week, and that will help determine exactly what each workout looks like, whether that's a full body workout each time or training splits if you're able to train 4 or more times per week. Make sure that you're getting some type of variation, whether that's with the undulating periodization to work strength, hypertrophy, and power in the same week, or if you choose to do a traditional periodization program with each phase lasting 3 to 4 weeks. The most important thing is to have fun with it. Work toward overall strength, health, and fitness, but enjoy your workouts. We do things we enjoy and are willing to do them more frequently if we enjoy them. So if you look forward to your workouts, your training plan will be sustainable long term, and you'll be able to stay fit and healthy for the rest of your life. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. For more information on any of the information I mentioned today, check out any number of the books within our catalog. More specifically, the NSCA's The Essentials of Personal Training and the NSCA's Guide to Program Design.